Welcome to the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. On behalf of our Elder Shadrach and the Supreme Council of Toronto, Canada, we extend special greetings in the name of our Father, the God of our forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, the only God of truth, according to the Holy Bible. My name is Michael Hinds, and with me is Avery McNeil.
Good evening, guests. Welcome to the program.
This broadcast comes to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight we would like to address the subject matter of economics. I know some people might think that this is out of our league, and I think you might be pleasantly surprised as to what contribution we could provide. Before we begin, let us just explain that the following presentation is for educational purposes only. It was prepared primarily for the healing of the children of slavery, their friends, and supporters. This presentation introduces a different way of thinking. It stands on the principles of the 1611 English publication of our Israelite Holy Scriptures, and it builds on the secret message of the old Negro spirituals. It does all of this by addressing the unique history, culture, and spirituality of the Israelite nation, God's chosen people, a people now living in captivity and bondage. This presentation may also contain explicit content that could be considered unpleasant. For example, the physical and spiritual enslavement of the children of slavery, beginning in this New Egypt at Jamestown, Virginia, since about the year 1619. In addition, much value is placed on our obedience to the wisdom of our Israelite prophets, our elders, and our priests, because to obey is to learn and to grow, but to disobey is to sow the seeds of our own disobedience, shame, and poverty. Personal discretion is advised. To begin, let us assert that all power and praises and glory belong to the Most High God of Israel, the God of our forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, who created the heavens and established the foundation of the earth, and formed the spirit of man within him, and chose the Israelite to be his holy servant, a people, as we said earlier, now living in captivity and bondage, beginning at Jamestown, Virginia, since the year 1619, and also gave us his holy laws, even the everlasting covenant, that we may be his witnesses in this world and lead by example. Amen.
Amen.
Tonight we offer much hope to all who are enduring the burden of poor economic practices. Without supplying too much criticism, we understand that those involved in the behavior that has created the present mess, the present economic mess, really did not know any better. Hence, this broadcast. Our effort is to reintroduce the wisdom of our forefathers, the God of Abraham. Our effort is to reintroduce the wisdom of our Father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. We will be better off, all of us will be better off, if we pay attention to the teaching of the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. Most individuals would agree that the global economic outlook appears to be rather dim, and has been for about the last 10 years. Moreover, there seems not to be anyone with the solution. The fact that there is no solution after 10 years seems to suggest that the nature of the problem is not understood. Maybe it is time for us to reevaluate our status. While taking a look at the global economic system, I observe that the quality of life of every individual appears to be tied to the land, or more specifically to the entity that controls or owns the land, either the government or the corporation. Moreover, most of these type of entities appear to be vigorously competing for control over the lives of the individual, mainly through the broad platforms of politics, economics, and philosophy. The sad part is that the individual seems not to be aware of what is really taking place. One of the questions that I have is, why is the controlling entity called landlords? Is someone suggesting that he is the Lord of the land or the Lord of the earth? That part seems to be a mystery to me. I don't quite get it. Nevertheless, we need, I believe, to undergo a process of re-evaluation. Who are we as individuals, as human beings? What is our purpose? How does what we call economics fit into our answers to these two questions? What is economics anyway, or what we identify as economics? What are we attempting to accomplish by this so-called economic activity? Who decides what this activity should be, and by what authority? These are but a few of the questions that we have with respect to the speculation that men have engaged in for hundreds of thousands of years, usually at their own peril, in order to live in a temporary environment of physical comfort, usually at the expense of others. So there seems to be a mystery, a cloud with regards to this economic activity, something that is not quite understood. I certainly don't understand it. And maybe tonight, rather than dwell on this process, we will put forward an alternative. Something that is much simpler, something that makes more sense, something that is published for everyone to read and digest. Judging by the outcome of all this economic speculation, which is supposed to be the mixture of goods, services, natural resources, personal greed, vanity, ignorance, etc., there seems to be a desire for personal power, of which wealth and happiness are the byproducts. Yet true wealth includes excellent health and wisdom, or it should anyway, and most men seem to lose their health and display limited wisdom in pursuit of personal power. So this begs the question, is there a better way to engage in economic activity? And this is why we are going to try to offer a better alternative. That alternative is what we consider to be the Israelite economic principles, an example of the perfect economy. There is a better way. Now, we understand that the Israelite way may seem a little different in many respects, or a little bit impossible. But there's only one way to find out, to give it a try. We will see that every Israelite acknowledges the supreme authority of the Most High God of Israel, and we acknowledge Him as our King and Father. The Most High God, as the Creator, owns everything. Israelites are His chosen servants and the administrators of His creation. Every Israelite, being a member of the royal family, supports the everlasting covenant with the Most High God of Israel. These are principles or fundamentals that are the building blocks of all that we do. These are the essential factors that have to be understood and implemented for any activity, economic or otherwise. This is why it is important that we understand these principles. Our initial economic objective, as demonstrated in the scriptures, must be national prosperity and self-sufficiency wherever possible. For example, in an economic downturn as one that we have right now, if we were to apply the economic principles of the Israelite, everybody would have a certain measure of food. Even though folks may be unemployed, they would never go hungry. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about national prosperity and self-sufficiency wherever possible. Each Israelite, we will see, was granted the right to possess land. This is also very important because with that land can come many resources, not only food, but other products as well. Then there's a special jubilee system, which does not allow for land to be permanently sold except in a city, which is important because the land returns to the original owners after 49 years. I mean, these are just a few of the highlights, but now we will get into the details. Let us take a look then at what was described as the Promised Land. The absolute title to all land, as we said before, belongs to the God of Israel. Hence, he alone has the power to take the land from the Canaanites and give it to the Israelites. And later, he expelled the Israelites and allowed the heathen to dwell therein. In Psalms 24, in verse 1 and 2, it says, "The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the floods." In the book of Haggai, in chapter 2, it says, the God of Israel declared, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts." And we may add, so is the oil and the natural gas, etc.
It's a great point you bring out, Michael, because you hear so many people who have limited understanding of the scriptures talk in reference to the Israelites when they came and they took the land from the Canaanites. A lot of people say it's unfair, but we have to remember that the God of Israel, the Almighty Spirit of truth, he created the heavens and earth. He created this land, and he specifically created the land, the promised land, for the children of Israel. So when you think of it in that aspect, it's quite fair that he would have a land set aside for his children, for his obedient children.
Good point. It is very important in any economic system to understand what is the objective, what is the goal of the economic system. Does it allow for the welfare of the nation, the prosperity of the nation, or the prosperity of the few? And if you look at the Israelite economic principles, one will see that it grows the nation, so that everyone grows together. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to be a rich person.
Right.
As a matter of fact, the poor is always going to be with us, according to the scripture.
Right.
But the poor is a very interesting dynamic in economics. I always believe that the poor is there as a challenge to the rich, to the wealthy, to see how the wealthy would conduct him or herself. And the poor, in my own words, I think, are the barometer of the rich, because the poor is not to be scorned or to be ridiculed, as we will see later. The poor is to be assisted in one way or another.
Right. And you see, when you really get to the when you really look at the Israelite system of economics, and you look in reference to the world, you see just the opposite. You see where a few percentage of the people, 10%, let's say, of the people own 90% of the wealth. So the wealth doesn't get trickled down to the people. And then you begin to see some of the things that we're seeing all across the world, particularly in northern Africa and other parts of that region.
Now, it is important that we make very clear up front that, and if you've been paying attention to our teaching, you would observe that there is no such thing as equality in our biblical principles. And if you were to ask me, am I happy with the fact that I'm poor and living in the land of my captivity, I'd say, hell no, I'm not. But I do believe that it is important to have a legal process whereby some people can make a lot of money. And I don't have to be one of them, keeping in mind that to whom much is given, much is expected. But the poor, again, and I have to come back to that point, they're there for a specific reason. And I think when certain, like you said, 10% of the folks own 90%, right away that screams insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what it's supposed to do.
Right.
If a person is blessed with wealth, that person is supposed to do his or her part to build.
Right.
And not only to build, but to lead.
Right.
Because in the sense where it requires wealth, where leadership requires wealth, and to lead by example. So I'm not saying that that person has to give that wealth away. Now that's a challenge. And I know that there are some rich people that do. And I don't want to name anyone because I don't have the evidence to indicate that. But nevertheless, I think that it is always good when you could use your wealth to promote peace and harmony and constructive dialogue and all those things, and prevent, like as you said earlier, some of the incidents that are going on in the world today.
Or you can, build facilities such as hospitals and, universities or whatever your heart's desire. Things of that nature that would help the people. Because
there's a reason why that individual was given that opportunity to earn that wealth. It is also important for us to make clear that there is no such thing on earth as private ownership. We are just leasing. If the God of Israel is the supreme authority and he owns everything, then when it comes to land, at least, there is no such thing as private ownership of land.
Well, I say if the government can use the concept called eminent domain, whereby if they find it suitable to take a land and build a road, let's say, how much more the God, the creator of the heavens and earth.
Exactly.
So you're absolutely right, Michael. There is no such thing in terms of private ownership.
Now let us then go to Numbers 26, 51 through 55, and get a better perspective concerning how this applies to Israel.
Okay, so Numbers 26 verses 51 through 56, and it reads, "These were the numbered of the children of Israel, 600,000 and 1,730. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Unto these the land shall be divided for inheritance according to the number of the names. To many thou shalt give the more inheritance, and to few thou shalt give the less inheritance. To every one shall his inheritance be given according to those that were numbered of him. Notwithstanding the land shall be divided by lot, according to the names of the tribes of their fathers they shall inherit. According to the lot shall the possession thereof be divided between many and few."
All right, so how does this apply, or can this be applied to the world? It can, as long as the world recognizes and abides by the principles of the Israelite nation. And this is the purpose of the Israelite nation, to set an example so that all would want to come in. This is the benefit of being a child of the Most High God. This is one of the advantages of being on the side of truth. Therefore, one could choose to adopt some of the principles and take his chances, like throwing the dice, or one can just follow the wisdom of the God of Israel and allow the God of Israel to allocate property according to size of family, according to need.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Right.
And also according to office, because we know that the Levites did not own any property. So everyone had land except the Levites. Maybe if everyone would come on board, maybe we'll just leave that for later. So each parcel of land carried an assigned right of inheritance, so that the proper heirs were made secure against any future loss. The owner had the freedom to use his land, to sell it, to trade it, to mortgage it, to farm it, to rent it, or even abandon it conditionally. The one thing that the owner could not do was to permanently surrender the title, either for himself or for his descendants, to any other person.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important to understand this because it means that that was a built-in process to prevent a whole bunch of people living in poverty. The whole size of the society from being taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like, again, as we said earlier at the beginning, the terms of the covenant applied.
Mm-hmm.
So one had to be very careful how one dealt with each other, with your neighbor, with your brethren.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same process that not only applied in terms of religious aspects and social aspects, that would apply in economic aspects.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, because immediately I think about the birthright that Esau gave up, and I see the importance of Israel keeping this title, as you say, within the family. And I just immediately thought about that. This is perhaps the reason. It has to stay within the family. The entitlements the name has to continue because it was a promise given to Abraham.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But keep in mind also that the concept of family as designed should really apply to all men and women on earth.
Okay.
So this is why we always talk about the gates of Israel. And Jesus made it very clear where one should enter.
Mm-hmm.
He said, enter in at the straight, narrow
Mm-hmm.
gates. So
right.
These are the 12 gates of Israel that are open to all, so that everyone can come in and be family, and then there will not be a problem applying the principles, the economic principles, as the scriptures are laying them out. Individuals may not understand all of these principles, but you cannot get it when you're outside.
Right.
That's why it is important that all are welcome to come in, and abide by the principles of the laws, statutes, and judgments of the Most High God, and then the rest will fall into place. The important point is that economics is not a separate entity from any other component of life.
Mm-hmm.
It is part and parcel of the whole thrust of living.
Mm-hmm.
So one cannot be a wild animal when it comes to business, and when it comes time to worship, be a saint, for want of a better word, quote unquote.
Right.
You have to apply by the same principle right across the board, whether it's in the educational field, the political field. Now, I'm not saying that there may not be applications, because what you do at the altar, you're not going to do in the storefront.
Right.
But my point is that there's a basic platform which should apply, or on which you stand
Mm-hmm.
at all times.
So in other words, if I'm a businessman in Israel, I'm not going to charge my brethren interest, usury.
Right. Exactly.
And keep that same, and that's the whole concept, of Israel, as you say. It's that family concept.
Right.
So you're not going to charge them interest and make a load of money and then come in and then, as you say, be this saint worshiping God.
Right. That aspect of selfishness has no place in Israel.
Right.
I'm not saying that one cannot utilize their own personal gifts and talents to achieve whatever that his or her fullest potential. Of course, that's an individual attribute and should be encouraged. But when it comes to certain aspects of family life, there has to be a broader scope, because the concept is to grow the nation and to build together, standing on a common platform. Now, for example, we have that Jubilee system that we mentioned earlier. The land, even though it may be sold, is returned to the owner, the original owner, on the 49th, after the 49th year. And as you said earlier, charging brethren interest, especially poor brethren, violates the terms of our covenant and weakens our national structure. And that is the point that has to be made, because, we go to the gas station today and we try to, buy a gallon of gas, and the price is astronomical.
I know,
So
ridiculous.
the point is, like, what are they in the middle of a recession? What are they trying to accomplish? You see, how does that aid in the and I'm not saying that one should not be free to charge whatever the market would bear, but one has to have a certain patriotic component as well, a certain national flavor, if you will, that allows them to want to make a contribution towards economic development and prosperity. So rather than gouging your neighbor, try to support him. Please, if Egypt or Libya supplies 5-10% of the oil, there's absolutely no way that you could get the oil from Libya to the pump in a month.
Right.
So why is it that overnight these prices go up 25, 30, 40, 50 cents?
It's a very good point. It's a good point.
Now, I could see next month you may have a gradual increment, right? But overnight, that makes absolutely no sense. That shows that's unpatriotic.
It's a sense of insecurity too. They're driven by, I guess, the stock market, they say.
No, and what is the stock market driven by? Roll the dice, or is that also insecurity? No, it makes absolutely no sense, and it does not lend itself. The point is that just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Right.
There is a level of economic responsibility that has to be displayed. There's a level of leadership that needs to be tapped or needs to be expressed. And this is where we are leaning. Where is that economic leadership? Where is that look, you're going to make a profit anyway.
Right.
Okay? But there's ways of responsibility that may be exercised. So anyway, the Jubilee system that we talked about allows our debts within Israel to be canceled every 7 years. Now, one might say, well, we'll get the scriptures to support this in a minute, but one might say that this does not encourage economic development. You run up a debt but that's not the way it works. The point is that, again, we're looking at a national prosperity program, a national development program, where individuals are encouraged to do the best that they can to advance the cause of the nation. Not to just sit back and run up a bill and then, 7 years, okay, wipe it out. No, that's a defeatist attitude. But we want a more progressive attitude, and that's what is taught. How can we achieve? Because when you look back and you see that ancient Israel was a very powerful nation, both economically and otherwise. And that came primarily from the spiritual aspect. So we don't rely on economics to demonstrate the power of the nation. The power of a nation is seen in the wisdom of the people, in how the people apply the instructions of our Father, the God of Israel. That's how the power of a nation is made manifest.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yes. So we don't count dollars and cents.
Right.
And maybe because we don't have much to count. But we have been taught to rely on a much more powerful and enduring principle, which is the spirit of truth.
So when you really think about Israel, I really think of this the word that comes to mind, commonwealth, the commonwealth.
Commonwealth of Israel, yeah, that's how it was established. And that commonwealth is a word that most people do not understand. Because first of all, you have to have wealth. That's the important point. Most people put emphasis on common, and ignore the fact that there has to be wealth. Now, as we said earlier, everybody can't be rich because everyone doesn't have the same gift, and there are those who are not given any wealth at all,
Right.
physically speaking, anyway, which would be the Levites, right?
Right.
So, how do we develop this commonwealth? And as I said, this is something that's inbred. That's the platform that we're talking about. The same spiritual platform that allows us to grow from the womb is applied, the same concept is applied to the economic principles. The national development to raise the nation to a point or to a level where it is superior, spiritually speaking,
Right.
to all other nations on the face of this earth.
Right.
And that superiority is not a status symbol. It is a leadership principle whereby the Israelite could lead by example so that others could see the wisdom of our Father, the God of Israel, and want to follow. That's the commonwealth. The wealth of the nation is in its spirituality, and how the God of Israel provides for us because we are obedient, because we have chosen, we have embraced the fact that He has chosen us, and demonstrate His laws so that others can see. The whole process has to do with the laws of life and the application thereof. So we have the Jubilee system, like I said, where the debt is canceled every year. But we also have honest trade. We also have fair wages. Fair wages are mandatory. Honest trade, mandatory. And we also have generosity and sharing. This is the norm, especially with the poor amongst us. And one of the most important aspects, which we leave for the last, is our tithing principle. We are the only nation on the face of the earth with a tithing principle. Nobody can tithe except an Israelite. You know, other people might claim that, just like no one can baptize except an Israelite. Other people claim to baptize. You know, no one can be circumcised except an Israelite. These words now will become generic. They've lost their meaning in the sea of ignorance, of imitation. But nevertheless, the tithing and the offerings are essential for our personal growth and prosperity.
Right. And it's so funny because you mentioned so much of this, our system. You talked about the commonwealth and how it's shared. You talked about the Jubilee system and not charging our brethren usury, interest. But it seems like the only thing that people were able to take out of this is a concept of tithing. I say take it because, it's a contradiction if you really think about it. Because so many people say that there is no law. And on the other hand, they try to take this system that was developed specifically for Israel, tithing, and they try to apply it to their philosophy. And they end up being a system where 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Well, as you were speaking, I'm thinking what they're doing, or what they call tithing, is first of all, they're taking using or misusing the great principles of the Israelite nation, and it is a recipe for poverty and failure. Because remember that for someone to be rich in this economy, a number of people must be made poor. And the only way you can do that is to transfer the wealth from one to another by means of deception, usually.
Right.
As we've described earlier, there seems to be a method whereby, either the corporate entities or the government entities are competing for the soul, if you will, of the people. And the people are so blind that this stuff is knocking them over and they can't see it.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say to folks that you have to rise up and do anything. I'm saying read the scriptures, understand what life is all about, see that there is a better tomorrow, and try to join with like-minded individuals to make a difference. So we got to start somewhere.
Right.
There's a much bigger, better, brighter world out there if we could only apply the principles that would allow that to evolve, and everyone would be better off if we do this. Now, I'm not trying to say that everyone is going to be operating at the same level. That will never happen. As you know, we've always talked about the fact that, we have 5 fingers, but each one is different.
Right.
Each one has a different capacity. It's the same with life, with individuals in life. We have to use our God-given talents to achieve whatever can be achieved according to our own potential. But before we get too carried away, we want to read some of Leviticus 25, because this is one of the central themes of the economic system. We can read as much of it maybe as possible.
Okay. It's Leviticus 25, beginning at verse 1, and reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourners with thee, and for thy cattle, and for thy beasts that are in thy land, shall all the increase thereof be meat. And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years. In the space of the 7 Sabbath of years shall be unto thee 49 years.
Okay, hold it for a moment, thanks. Let us go back and try to digest this one. It says that 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyards, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyards. This is so much wisdom. How I just don't know how some of these big corporations that produce all these fertilizers, now they've gone so far as to producing artificial seed that will grow once, which again is so much insecurity, because it means that you have to buy it every season.
Right.
And then, there's a whole lot of mess on that, but I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm excited by this fact that if you allow the land to rest in that 7th year, what are the advantages of that activity? Now, anytime that you rest, do you know what happens?
You rejuvenate.
You rejuvenate.
Yes.
You repair. And you strengthen yourself.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the land. You rejuvenate the land on its own accord. One of the best rejuvenation processes? Rain, thunder, and lightning.
Wow.
That lightning comes all the way down, and it must transmit something. That's why if you get in this way, it'll cut you down. Right? And the rain, all of the components of the water, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, all those things.
I also want to mention too, when we talk about the land resting, Michael, it's very important that our listeners know that in ancient times the Israelites would divide the land in patches So the entire land wouldn't rest on the seventh day. Patches, we'd have patches, and a certain patch would rest on that seventh year, while they would continue with
Oh
the other
yeah,
patches.
most definitely. I
Right.
mean, it's not like you
Right.
stop working
Right.
for the entire
Yeah.
year.
You know,
No.
when I first read that, that's what I thought.
You know what it's called?
What is it?
Crop rotation.
Oh, crop rotation.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have land rotation also.
Okay.
My father used to do that,
Okay.
and don't want to really talk about my dad, but he's doing great. He's in better condition than I am, but nevertheless, and he's twice my age.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, the important thing is this crop rotation allows for the soil to be rejuvenated.
Mm-hmm.
It does not allow for the depletion of the soil by growing the same thing over and over and over,
Right.
without giving the land an opportunity to rest.
Right.
That's why I'm saying this is tremendous wisdom. And it says in the fourth verse, in the seventh year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. See, now, while the land is resting, the God of Israel can do what he has to do to rejuvenate the soil.
Right.
So that the next year, when you plant, you're going to get double, quadruple the yield.
This is the same God who planted a garden in Eden, so he should know.
He knows how to grow stuff.
Right.
Believe me.
Right.
He knows. And then in addition to the resting of the land, and the rejuvenation of the land, it talks about in the fifth verse that whatever groweth on its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of the vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the Lord. So that's the poor is allowed to harvest that.
Wow.
And later on we will see, I'm not sure if it's in this same chapter, where instead of reaping all the produce of the land, they allow a few for the poor to harvest.
Right. Wow.
So I marvel at all the wisdom, because it's like he's got you coming and he's got you going. He got you on the right and he got you on the left. He got you to the front and he got you in the back. I mean, like the top and the bottom, like there's no way that you cannot prosper.
Right.
As long as you're doing what he says to do. It's when you lean onto your own understanding that there's going to be confusion. And you'll have a hit and a miss, and you'll have maybe 4 or 5 years of prosperity, and then you'll have what we call today a recession.
Mm-hmm. But I can see we talked a little about commonwealth. Verse 6, it talks about, and the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, but not just you, for thee and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth within the land. So the provisions have been laid out for the entire people within the land. So it's a beautiful
it's a marvelous process. And not only the provisions. Look, the year before, the yield was so great, or the 2 years before, we have to read the scriptures and see when we get to it. The yield of the harvest was so great, you can afford to allow comfortably the land to lie fallow in the 7th year. And not only that, but when you start again to sow and reap and harvest the stuff, again another big crop. So again, like I said, he's got you coming and going. I mean, like how can you lose?
Right? How can you lose in this win-win situation?
Yeah,
right.
It's amazing. Why are people not doing this today?
Just want to take the time to tell our listening audience that we're talking on the subject of economics from an Israelite perspective. For more information, you can get us on the web at theisraelitenation.com, or you can phone us here in the Atlanta area at 678-363-6190. Again, on the web, it's israelitenation.com. Here in the Atlanta area, you can phone us at 678-363-6190.
And leave a message at that phone number, and we will definitely call you back. As a matter of fact, I would be happy to chat with you. Now, again, we have to ask ourselves, and we know that most of our listeners are urban listeners, and and that creates a problem sometimes because it's difficult to imagine what life would be in a rural setting. Well, I happen to be fortunate enough to live in both settings, and I can tell you that this is great. What is being described here in the book of Leviticus, chapter 25.
Right.
This is the essence of, I mean, there's nothing like working the land and seeing the yield, working the land according to the instructions from the God of Israel, and seeing the land on its own practically produce,
Right.
such yields that you don't have to sweat. This is what I'm saying, that as a result of obedience to the God of Israel, you will not only have a bountiful year to share with your friends and neighbors and the poor, but you could sell as well,
Right.
to maintain your own, economic prosperity.
It's like, it's almost, I think there's a parable, I can't remember, but it's the concept of it is basically you grow the land, or you grow that garden, and one day the garden will grow you.
Exactly.
So you take care of it, and it'll take care of you according to the principles and the laws laid out.
And the bottom line is there will be no one going hungry.
Right.
And we're not just talking eating the scraps that didn't get sold, that wasn't sold the night before or the day before. We're talking real good, God-given organic food. I mean, this is the real organic food.
Amen.
Because this soil, like we said, is pure. It's almost virgin material, practically. And it's everything is healthy. The food is good. It tastes different too, I tell you that.
Want to continue to read?
Yes, let's read some.
Verse 7 of Leviticus chapter 25, verse 7. And it says, "And for thy cattle and for thy beasts that are in thy land shall all the increase thereof be meat. And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee. 7 times 7 years, and the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years."
Okay. Let us pause for a moment, because I think we might have to come back to this later.
Okay.
But I wanted to introduce another subject matter.
Okay.
Now, the subject of poverty. And I know the reason that I wanted to introduce this is because these are tough times right now, and a lot of people that were in the middle class are falling off the dividing line into the poverty class. But the covenant provides various means to address poverty. All of these angles, we talk about the commonwealth of Israel. Believe me when I tell you, all the angles are covered. The God of Israel did not leave anything out.
Right.
Tithing is extremely important to the Israelite. Extremely important. If you go to the book of Malachi, and I'll read this one, Malachi 3, 10 to 11, he says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that they may be meat in my house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that they shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all the nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, we got to go over this again and make sure that everybody understands what is saying here.
Okay.
Again, the first point is the covenant. That's the foundation. It's from the covenant there's tithing. Because if there is no covenant, then there's no stipulation. There is no signing off on anything. So, because there is a covenant, and there's a covenant with the Israelite nation, then there is tithing as a component of that covenant, or part of it. He said, bring me your tithes into the storehouses. Okay? The storehouse would be the treasury, where the tithes are kept. And now, tithes today represent money. But in ancient times, it wasn't always like that.
Right.
Sometimes you would take the best harvest,
Right.
right?
Right.
You take your best corn, your best bananas, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And maybe you give a lamb or whatever. That they may be meat in my house. Meat is food.
Right.
Right? I remember when I was a child, we used to talk about meat for the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not talking feed them flesh, but we're talking grass or
Right.
whatever. So meat is food. And prove me, he said, herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open to you the windows of heaven. So he's going to bless you once you give him the tithes.
Mm-hmm.
You're not giving him the tithes. The tithes is going to the nation, to his family.
Right.
So if you give my family something, well, yes, I'm going to show favor upon you.
Right.
So the God of Israel is no different.
Mm-hmm.
He's opening the windows of heaven and pour out to you a blessing that there is not going to be room enough to receive. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's why it is essential that we tithe and tithe punctually. He says, and not only that, but he says, I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. So whomever, it seems as if somebody is going to have to go. You remember in ancient Egypt, we had the angel of death.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sent out at a certain time. But with the Israelites, they had the blood of the lamb on their doorpost.
Mm-hmm.
And once he saw the blood, So here's a similar situation. The devourer has to go. And who is the devourer? Is it Lucifer? I don't know. Sounds like a good job for Lucifer, right?
Right.
Or one of his agents. And he said, I will rebuke him, that he shall not destroy the fruit of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time. That is something that a lot of folks will not understand. My dad used to take a stake and drive it into the tree in order to get it to bear. And there's some other things that he did as well, And, people in the South here, and if they're over 60, they might know some of these tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that you did, you had to, But there is a false bearing and a true bearing. Meaning, let's say you had a mango tree, for instance. You have maybe a couple of years where the fruit would not grow to its true potential. It'll bear and then it'll fall off and it'll be bitter or something or sour or whatever. But then when you do whatever you have to do to the tree, then everything blooms at the right proportion.
Mm.
So he is saying that the vine will not cast fruit before the time in the field. So it will not have that false bearing, much like a woman who has had a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
Or, whatever, the child did not go to term or whatever the case is. So it's the same thing with the vineyards and the fruit trees. Mm-hmm. And, things happen to us in our lives, but we are not sure of the spiritual background that is in operation that created that problem.
Yeah.
So all these things are for us to understand and take advantage of if we tithe properly and accurately. And he said, in addition, so that's the second thing. The third thing he says, and all nations shall call you blessed, for they shall see your prosperity. He says, for they shall be a delightsome land. Ye shall be a delightsome land, meaning a land in which you will be, they can be delighted in, or you demonstrate that delight, right? That's the big deal. That's something that we all want to take note of, And of course, tithing is 10% of your blessings. So that's good. Mm-hmm. All of this is part of the advantage of the Israelite. All of this is part of the economic activity. You see, people think that you open up the Bible and it's all about um, God in the sense that you don't have a life to live on your own. God is only looking out. He's looking at you new moons and the Sabbaths. And that's the primary time that you're dealing with him. The rest of the time you're dealing with your brethren, you're doing your work, you're advancing the cause of the nation. All of these are important issues that we have to do. We have to set aside time for education, time to play and have fun, time to party. All of these are important aspects. So economics is also a big deal.
Michael, I could listen to you all night. I'm just here taking notes, and just my mind is wondering, and I'm kind of just wondering how economics plays, or the relationship between economics and healthcare. Because, unlike yourself, I grew up in not the city but the suburbs. My parents grew up in the South, and they grew up in in the times 30s and the 40s, which was racial segregation and all of that growing up. But they grew up off the land, and my mom would tell me wonderful stories of the food that they ate and how healthy they were. No health care system, it was healthy. Everything else, they would go and get the herbs of the land, and they just knew how to do things. But the point I'm making here is that the health care, there seems to be a connection between the economics, the health care, and it all begins with the covenant. So you look in ancient Israel, you had a very healthy nation.
Very healthy indeed, in more ways than one. It's a very, very valid point, and we only have like 4 minutes, and it's going to take like a lot more than that to address it. I think we have to do this, a second part to this.
Okay.
I really didn't think that, it would be so much, but there's a lot to it, because you're absolutely right. There is a direct correlation between healthcare and the covenant, healthcare and economics. And, if you don't take care of the spiritual component, then you're going to have to take care of the medical component on your own. But if you take care of one, there's a trickle-down effect that will assist in a big way from the health point of view. For example, we talked about the soil. And, a lot of people today are marketing this organic food. Well, I would challenge anyone to produce organic food in North America. I mean, honestly. I mean, like, the atmosphere is so polluted.
Right.
The soil, as a result of the rain, the same atmosphere, when it rains, the soil drips. Whatever it is you put up must come down.
Right.
And so on and so forth. And then, of course, no one heard about crop rotation or allowing the land to fallow for the seventh year. No one does that. That will be considered a waste.
Right. It's all about the money.
Yeah. And then the fertilizers, the chemicals that they use. Back in the day, the fertilizers was down. Cow down.
Yes.
Sheep manure.
Right.
Which was a composition of the same grass that they ate just the day before.
Yeah.
Just recycled.
Right.
So it's a whole different world today. And that's why we have such high healthcare bills and so many side effects, and there's no cure for anything.
Makes me think of the landlord concept you were talking about. This idea of wanting to be lord over the land.
Right.
So you start injecting these animals with hormones, and you ruin the whole cyclical process that's supposed to run naturally on law.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We've got a few seconds left. We want to invite you back next week. We will continue this process. There is so much more to discuss, and sometimes it takes us a little while to really get this started. But nevertheless, we'll be here next Friday to look at part 2 of this process and maybe have a better handle on the whole economic picture, at least an alternative to what we have today. Have a good night.